So excited tonight because we're going to talk about the Little River Band. Over 30 million records sold worldwide. Not only are they embraced in their native Australia, but we love them in the United States. And Glenn Fry has said that they are the best singing band in the world.
Yeah.
And I know you have a story to tell.
Yeah. Well, and that's really true. They've had a lot of albums. I think they've had something like 30. Let's see, I had written it down here. Let me jump ahead here. Yeah. 18 studio albums, 5 live albums, and 23 singles. That's quite a bit. And it's been a long career, but, it's the changes in the group happen quite often. And so the guys, by the time I got to work on this box set, there was no original member, but they did all the songs beautifully. I mean, and that happened as the band progressed. It changed members, and it just was all the stuff. And I was a fan right from the start with them. And I had dealt with a guy named John Berg, who was the creative director at Capitol Records, and I had dealt with him a couple times earlier on a Grand Funk Railroad album that we did, the E Pluribus Funk, and then I dealt with him on the Bee Gees album, Main Course. And he seemed to be a really nice guy. Unlike, I knew Ed Thrasher at Warner Brothers, I knew Roland Young at A&M, I knew George Osaki at MCA, but and John Berg, but they never really gave us work. I mean, we were really sort of a competitor. But I had thought I had broken through on that with John. We had some good times. He seemed to be a really big fan of the work we were doing, certainly the work we were doing for his label. And we kind of had he'd take my call, he'd see me, and he also promised me that, we started talking, and he was talking about stuff that he had coming up, and all these albums to do. And, it was going to be too much for him, this new release. And there was a new Little River Band album coming up. And he said, and because we were talking, I said, oh man, I really love their music. It's real soft rock, and they harmonize, and they're just a great vocal group and musicians. And, and even though every time it changed, it didn't get worse. Like some bands get worse. Other bands, actually, you never miss a beat, and you just keep on going. And when I met the lead singer, Wayne, he we hit it off right away. But we'll talk about that in a minute. But so I was forming this relationship with John Berg, and he had said, well, we're going to let you do the new Little River Band. And I'm like, whoa, this is really great. I mean, I was really stoked. And I found out that George Martin was producing the album. And yeah, oh yeah, and this is like in the 1980s. I'm trying to remember. Let me see. I think I wrote it down. What year? 2015 is when I met them, and I'll get into that. But it was 2015. It was 1987 or 84. It was 1984 when John Burke and I were talking about us doing that box set. And it ended up where he ended up doing it himself, and really didn't give us the shot at it. And, it was like, and then he never really took my calls after that and stuff. But I think, he was really psyched about the album. And he was also impressed with the fact that George Martin was producing it. And I saw it as, wow, this could be really great because, if that's a pathway to the Beatles, that would be awesome, I mean, and, if he liked what we did, and, the album was called Time Exposure. And I had some really great ideas that, because he had said, yeah, the new album is going to be called Time Exposure. And, and so I was already thinking about things that we could do. And then I found out that we weren't doing it. And, it was kind of a real letdown, but, we stayed busy, and, that's just what happens. You can't get them all, you just really can't. Even though you want them all, you can't really get them all. And we got our share. We got our fair share, and there's no regrets there. But, again, it was just another reason why, here's a guy that's got his own art department, and, he was giving stuff out to other people when he got overloaded. So it seemed like it was an interesting thing, that I would be able to have this opportunity, and so anyway, we cut to 2015, and I'm having Larry Tolbert of Radiant Partners was a huge fan. I met him through a tenant that I had years earlier. He had a big investment company in Memphis and Nashville. And he was connected to the Smithsonian's Rock and Soul Museum there in Memphis. And because he was on the city council and all this stuff. Anyway, he brought me to Memphis. We packed up 125 pieces, all framed and stuff, and sent them off to Memphis in these crates that he actually had built. I said, if you want me to come there, then, we're going to have to pack these things up. And this has got to be shipped by a professional shipper, by making crates by a professional crate maker. And he spent $9,000 making 5 crates, that held 125 pieces. But each piece was, not only was it the crate, but each piece was in plastic, and it was inside its own custom-made heavy-duty cardboard box. So they had, I guess they had a template that would allow them to just punch in the measurements of the piece, and it would create a die cut pattern of the box with folds and everything. So there were all the 125 boxes, each one fit the piece of artwork, and 5 crates. So it was quite an ordeal, but Larry really believed in me, and he believed in the show, and he wanted to do something for Memphis. So we started out by bringing me to a company called Art and Speed, which was in Cloverdale, just outside of Memphis. And the Art and Speed was a guy who had about 100 classic and muscle cars, all kind of restored and in a big showroom, and so we decided to have a show there. So the guy built these big panels that went into all the walls in this room, this huge room. And we put up artwork on the panels and stuff. And I'll send you a couple of pictures if you like.
We'd love to see that.
Oh, yeah, because you got all these 57 Chevy and a 56 Seabird and all these amazing, beautiful cars, and then all this artwork. And we had a huge show, and it was all catered, and it was big screens with rock and roll videos going. And there were a ton of people. While we were hanging the show there, the PR guy, Bob, came out and said, "Hey, go." I was in the backpack unpacking, Bob Heatherton, and he was doing the PR for Art and Speed, and he said, "There's a guy out there you should really meet, a guy named John Doyle, and he's with the Smithsonian Museum here for rock and roll." And I went out there to meet him, and I swear to God, he was standing in front of the Welcome My Nightmare piece, and his jaw was down to here, and he was kind of shaking. He thought he was going to come and see somebody that took some album covers and framed them, right? So he was seeing the actual art. Cut to the chase, we ended up getting an 18-month show at the Smithsonian, which was really great. But
that is fabulous.
At that show, we had an unplugged, believe it or not, you talk about destiny and how things were meant to be. At the show, at the Rock and Soul Museum, they had a Wayne Nelson and a couple other guys from the current group and Wayne is this lead singer and guitar player and stuff, and they did an unplugged concert there at the museum.
Oh, that's neat. That did.
Yeah, I mean,
concert.
We were there, and it was like, oh my God, I'm finally going to be able to meet these guys, because it wasn't that huge a thing. It was very limited to the people. There was probably 100 people, and it was a fantastic concert. And after the show, after they performed, I went up to Wayne and introduced myself, Wayne Nelson, and I said, we started talking because all my artwork's there, and they're looking in through the show, and the guy's just really impressed with all the stuff. And Larry Tolbert sort of knew Wayne. He knew his wife and stuff. They had been friends, so he kind of introduced us, and we started talking. And I said, back in the day, this is something you probably don't know, but do you remember John Burt, the creative director of Capitol Records? And he goes, yeah. And I said, well, I said, it's funny that we should get together here, because he had said, hey, Ernie, you and Pacific Pioneer are going to do the Time Exposure album for Little River Band, and we never got to do it. And he went, I don't even want to talk about that album. And I said, what do you mean? He said, first of all, the group hated it, okay? And it was shoved down our throats. They did this thing where there was no time to do anything different, and this was it, and that was the end of it. And so they were never really happy with it. and I kind of remembered a couple things that I was going to do. And the cover that they did was just really very weak. And, and John had done, I guess, another album for them. They weren't really happy with it. Anyway, Wayne said, well, I love your work and I'd love to be able to do something. We have a box set coming up that, we're dealing with a record company, but we have control. I'd like to introduce you to their creative people over there and their, guys, the sales guys and stuff that are handling the PR guys, and let them know that I want you to do this box set. So it was like, oh yeah, okay, great. This is going to be good, and it was called the Big Box Set. And when I talked with the creative director there at the label, he was not real thrilled, because I think they were planning on doing it. I mean, the Little River Band was a well-known band with a lot of songs and a lot of albums, and then the number of albums that we talked about and singles and stuff, that doesn't include the compilation albums, of which there were many.
Yes.
I mean, this was one that covered a lot of decades of music, but there were other ones before this one. And so, they kind of tried to do we don't have a lot of money, and, there's really not a lot of time. And, and I think that they were already working on it, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily, Wayne was on the call with me, and he said, well, look, here's the deal. We want Ernie to do the album, okay, the box set. And, he has already promised me that he'd do it. He's a pro. He knows what he's doing. Let's just let him do it. So reluctantly, they gave the project over to us. And we had, I don't know, it was some ridiculous amount, like I think $1,500 or something, to do a box set with all the stuff, right? I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of stuff, but there was those different covers that you're seeing there for the little CDs and stuff. And then the cover itself over here that we did. And then the back cover, which is really great, which you see over here.
I love that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was just a beautiful, and Bob Englesey, but the guy that does all my finishing, he did a beautiful job on that. I just did rough sketches, and, he takes it. We did that album, and there's like a 12-page libretto inside there that you see sitting. They signed, this is the box, and they signed, each one of them signed the box, and I guess they did 100 of them. I got box number 47. So that was pretty cool. And
I saw those signatures, and I was just going to ask you about that.
Yeah, that's the guys. Yeah, that's the guys in the group. And they decided that they were going to do 100 signed and numbered, box sets. And they gave me number 47. I think they were going to give them to a lot of friends and maybe even make them available. I don't know whether they were going to do that or just friends and people that meant a lot to them. And in the booklet itself, they gave me a whole page write-up, which was really great. I mean, thanking me for doing the job, and just really, Wayne and the guys were really, really great. I only met Wayne and one of the other guys. That was I think it was his guitar player, and I'm trying to remember if I don't remember his name, but anyway, it'll come to me, and it always comes to me after the fact. So I was just looking to see if I had made a note.
I know Wayne is still with the band from.
Oh yeah, Wayne is still with them, and they still tour. They still tour, and they sound great. I mean, I thought before I knew there was so many changes in the group, I thought the Unplugged thing was really them. I mean, they nailed the songs, and I was a huge fan of their music. And it didn't sound. I mean, it wasn't as it was unplugged. It wasn't overproduced and all that stuff, but it was unplugged, and it was very interesting. And they just were really, really happy with what we ended up doing. And like I said, there's a front and a back cover, and then all those different CD covers. There's like 6 of them, 5 of them or 6 of them, and all the credits on the back. And it's all the albums, all the songs and stuff, which was really kind of neat. And so I've kind of got my wish, which was to do an album for Little River Band. And I actually got to meet Wayne, and, it was really neat. And we spent some time in Memphis, but after Memphis, I went back to Los Angeles, and I did the thing there. He was on tour somewhere. We would send him stuff that he would get while he was on the road. And so, he kind of approved everything. And then the record company said, okay, cool. But they weren't, like I said, they weren't jumping up and down because we were, given the assignment. But at the end, they really liked what we did. I mean, I think we surprised, as well as surprising ourselves and Wayne and the rest of the guys in the group, we surprised them too. And there's always talk of, well, we need to do something more again and all that. You hear that every time, and it never happened again. I mean, I've done such little work for record companies. I mean, but that's okay. I mean, there are people that say, well, you've done 250 album covers. There are art directors that have done more than that, and that's true. And they were usually art directors or creative directors at record companies, where they would automatically get, this month's release is 25 albums. This month's release is 35 albums. The holidays, there's more. I mean, and so they have a limited number of people in their art department. And as the groups got more and more control, the art departments in record companies got smaller and smaller because we weren't the only, group around that was doing album covers, and the groups, had control. Hypnosis was a big one in Europe. I mean, they did a lot of the Pink Floyd albums, a lot of the European covers, a lot of photography. We were more American bands and more illustration. So, but the two sort of went really well together. I mean, I was a big fan of Hypnosis's work, and they actually, when Storm Thurgeson and I forget the other guy's name, they came to LA in the early 70s. They were doing a book, an album cover book. And they spent 3 days interviewing us and hanging out at Pacific Pioneer. They were big fans of the work. And, and we ended up, I think, with 13 pages in their book, in their first book of album covers. So, that was kind of neat, meeting, those guys and getting to, meet Wayne and do this cover was very important to me. I mean, it certainly wasn't the biggest album that I ever did. And it wasn't, the most popular group, but it didn't matter. It was like, you have a kid, you've heard me say this before, I never had any children. What you see behind me is my children. And there's a whole bunch of them. And, I look at them that way. It's hard for me I would think, I guess what I'm trying to say is even the worst package that we ever did with the smallest budget, there was Kane Roberts we did, and the Fifth Dimension, which was a greatest hits cover that we did. And Marilyn McCoo, was a big fan of our work, and they, came, they had pictures, they had no budget, and we did it. I mean, we did it for very little, but we've done an album for them. And that was really, great to know. And even though it wasn't the most beautiful, not every one of your children are beautiful. They're just all healthy with 10 fingers and 10 toes and, 5 eyes and 14 heads. But other than that, they're all pretty normal.
But you did it with care and love, and
yeah.
with the Little River Band. Wow, good work and destiny.
Yeah,
that is quite a story. I think you were meant to do something with them, Ernie.
Yeah, it was. That's what I was saying in the beginning. It's like it was meant to be, whether it was right then in the '80s or became in the 2000s. It was there. It was so weird that we should be at the Smithsonian, and Wayne and the guys are doing an unplugged thing. It was him and 2 of the other guys, 3 guitars and harmonizing, 3-part harmonies. It was beautiful. And, and so what are the odds, and he and I talked about that too. I mean, he didn't really like what, they had done at the record company. And it was a real thrill for him, because here he is surrounded by my artwork and my company's artwork, not just mine, but my company's artwork. And it's impressive. When I once put, when there was a guy that's the head of rock and roll for Bottoms auction house, and he came out here about 6 months ago to look at some of the pieces in the collection. And I had 35 pieces sit out, and he was overwhelmed. It was like, what it was like? It is crazy. In the Crystal Skull, the Harrison Ford Raiders of the Lost Ark, it wasn't that one, but it was one of them where they had this crystal skull. And they were in this room where all the crystal skulls were, and one was missing. And so they put it on there, and everything changed. It was like this amazing energy. And that's what it was like, having those pieces in one place all uncovered. I mean, it was, and it was like that at the museum show in Memphis, you know. I mean, people were just, and you know, what we did was we put a big anvil case, which I did all the branding for back in the 70s when it was Acme Crate Company, like the Roadrunner, and then it became Anvil Cases, and we did all the branding and stuff. You know, it was a great account to have. But we put a big Anvil case in the room with about 24 album covers that where the artwork was hanging on the walls, and people could walk over and pick up the 12 and 3/8 by 12 and 3/8 album cover, and then walk underneath, and there's a 30 by 40 illustration of what they're looking at, 12 by 12. It was amazing. I was like a fly on the wall a lot of times, where I would just hang out and be like one of the tourists. And they had a real spike at that museum. I mean, we were scheduled for a 12-month show, and then we were going to bring everything back to Los Angeles. And John Doyle, the curator, said, "Hey, man, can you extend? We were going to do an Elvis thing, and can you extend? But it's late, and they're having problems. And can you extend the show for another 6 months?" And I'm like, "Oh, you got to be kidding, man! I mean, that's like a dream come true. You know, that's like me being on your show. You know, I mean, it's the block party is really kind of one of those kind of things where you just can't say no, and you feel right at home, and it was great. And when he did that, I mean, it was awesome. So we did an 18-month show there, and like I said, I met Wayne and Rhonda, his wife, and a couple of the other guys there through Larry, and really never touched base or never really talked to them after that. Wait, hang on a second. There's probably a client. Yeah, it's a client. They'll wait. We can't be disrupted here. I don't know how to shut up. There we go. They can wait. This is more important. So,
well,
anyway.
I applaud Wayne for standing up, when he was on that call with you,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and again, that was like a real Alice Cooper thing. That was like a real Burton Cummings thing, I mean, and where they would actually Black Oak Art stuff, Butch Stone with Black Oak. I mean, they would stand up for us because they would get resistance from the record companies as well. The record companies just didn't go, "Oh, okay, well, you got control. You can go ahead and use whoever you want." No, there was a fight to the death. I mean, they would give them tours through the art department and have sketches and stuff that they had done, expecting them to come through and go, "Oh, wow, that's really great." And the ones they did that to were already committed to us, which was really kind of funny. So, but, and again, we didn't get each and every one of them. I wish that, there were some like this, this Little River Band cover but in the end, it all comes around, man. It all comes back. It was meant to be, like you said, and I'm just really happy that it did happen, I mean, and so just another album, another notch in my gun. So
gives me a whole new respect for the band, because I'm looking at, all this beautiful artwork behind you, and that, especially that
I'm gonna be sending all this to you.
Oh, and I'm gonna post it. And
the front and back of the box is really beautiful. That's what you see down here, pretty small. Well, the front you see they're big, but the back is even nicer because it's got the box and it's shooting this beam down into North America. I mean, it was really kind of neat. And again,
perfect.
It was all. I went from a sketch to the finished art that you see there. I mean, Bob is really, a Houdini when it comes to taking my sketches and making them look beautiful. I always say, he's been making me look good for years. We've been friends since 1984 when he worked at Pacific Pioneer, right out of Penn State. And we did some really great stuff together. And then when he started his own video company, post-production and stuff, he kept on using me for the print stuff, but he was more into the digital thing. So. But we have a great relationship, and things go. We're like an old married couple, we finish each other's sentences.
That's great. That's great. Oh, the next question I'm going to
song.
You. Yes.
Song. Well, I got to be honest with you because there's so many. I mean, this particular package has just about every song they did, and so for me, it's been very hard to pick songs, but I did. And I hope they're ones that you like as well.
Let's see if we gel.
The first one that I liked, I heard Wayne do on the Unplugged thing was the Night Owls. Okay, that was one. And Reminiscing is another one. And then First Under the Wire.
Ooh.
And the last one would be Cool Change. So those four, you can prep any one or more of them. I hope they're ones that you like as well, but certainly feel free to put Two of them, two of the four.
Yes, yes. I love their work, but yeah, I was reminiscing definitely. And Cool Change, I can remember hearing Cool Change on the
Yeah.
radio.
Oh,
And
they were
what
great.
that is just a beautiful song. And one of my bosses, we used to have a radio one place where I worked at, and Cool Change came on the radio, and he said, "Oh, please turn that up. I love the Little River Band." So
Yeah, sure.
they
Yeah,
really,
they had a huge following. I mean, they were big in Australia, but they were in Melbourne where they came from, but in all of Australia and the US, I mean, they were huge here too. You know, that you just don't have that many albums and singles and stuff if you're not. I mean, they were certainly one of those groups. And like you said, Wayne and them are still touring. They just came off the road. They moved back to Memphis. They had moved to the desert and he and Rhonda just moved back to Memphis. So, and I'll tell you, Memphis is a beautiful place. You just don't want to be there when all the pollen is there. I mean, I came out one day when we were there, and the car looked like snow, all on top of the car. I mean, thick, high, but it was all brown. It was all pollen from the trees. It's like they built this city in Redwood, Sherwood Forest. There's all this greenery and trees, and then you get toward the downtown near the pyramid where the Bass Pro Shop is in that big pyramid and the Mississippi River. It's just beautiful. You know, Beale Street.
oh,
You
Beale
know,
Street has so
yeah,
much
yeah.
history. So
I
are you
loved it there.
telling me that I'm going to be sneezing when I decide to go to Graceland?
Just don't go. Just don't go when the pollen's there. I mean, and I guess that's summertime or right before summer, but it gets pretty hard. Rick Rodriguez was one of my friends that I went to college with. He went with me to help hang the show and stuff, and he had really bad allergies and stuff, and he was taking all kinds of medication. We had to take an emergency, and yeah, it gets real tough if you're not used to it. But it's certainly a beautiful place to visit, you know, and they have great food.
Oh no,
But
that
there's
really
a
got me going.
if you like oysters, there's a place called the Pearl, and that place is amazing. It has the most incredible oysters. And, you know, I mean, I loved it, but again, it's a nice place to visit, but I would never want to live there. You know?
The Pearl, huh? You're talking to a Baltimore girl, Ernie. We Baltimoreans, we love our seafood.
Yeah.
So that you're
Oh,
really
yeah.
tempting me now. Memphis is on my bucket list for sure. You kind of brought, and just in this backstory, you really brought a lot of it via Australia.
Yeah.
With the Little River Band. So many performers go down to Memphis and
Yeah.
perform. It's
Yeah.
just a great mecca.
Oh, yeah. The whole thing is just a great, Stax Records is there and, all these other, different, I'm trying to remember the guitar company. Was it, not Fender? It was, their headquarters. The Rock and Soul Museum used to be in their headquarters. Not Fender. It was like
Is it Gibson? Maybe I don't
Gibson.
know.
Yes, it
Gibson. I
was
think it's
Yeah,
Gibson.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the museum was originally in their facility, and then they moved it into the FedEx Center, which is like our Staples Center where all the sports things and stuff happen. And they're right there. When you walk up, the tour bus is let out, and you can either go into the center or you can go into the Rock and Soul Museum, which is really great. And it was great for us because, their show started with the blues and, and the cotton fields and stuff like that, and how it evolved into Stack Records and Elvis Presley and, that whole early rock and roll thing. And their museum ended in the late 60s with an Elvis Presley outfit and a motorcycle that he had, a motor scooter, whatever it was. And our show started in the late 60s and went up into the mid 80s. So we added another 2 decades to
Wow.
their show, which was a perfect fit, and made it even more perfect to meet Wayne and do this cover, and again, thank you so much for letting me tell the story, I'm looking forward to next week already.